Captain Jalen Mercer was not supposed to be there. His orders had been simple: scout the outer edge of the disputed zone, avoid contact, and return with reports. Yet curiosity had always been Jalen's weakness. He was human, after all, and humans had a habit of stepping into places where others feared to tread. So when his sensors picked up the faint signal of a massive alien ship drifting silently in the void, Jalen ignored protocol and went closer. The ship was enormous, larger than any vessel he had ever seen. Its hull was scarred from battles, dark metal plates patched with strange glowing runes. It looked less like a ship and more like a fortress drifting through the stars. His first thought was that it had been abandoned. But as he drew nearer, the power readings told a different story. The ship was alive, systems running, weapons sleeping but ready. Jalen hesitated only a moment. Every instinct told him to turn back, to mark the location and return to his fleet. But another part of him whispered that this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. A warlord's ship, alone and vulnerable. Who knew what secrets were inside? And so, against all reason, he docked his shuttle and stepped into the airlock of the alien vessel. The corridors were dark and cold. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, casting eerie blue light on the metal floor. The silence pressed on him, broken only by the echo of his boots. He gripped his plasma sidearm tightly, knowing it would do little against whatever lived here. He had heard stories of these warlords, towering creatures bred for conquest, their names whispered in fear across dozens of systems. As he pushed deeper inside, the ship suddenly came alive. Lights flared, the airlock behind him sealed, and a heavy door ahead opened with a low growl of machinery. Jalen's heart thumped. He stepped forward, and there he saw him. The alien warlord was massive, nearly twice Jalen's height, his body wrapped in armor that looked grown rather than forged. His skin was dark bronze, his eyes a burning gold. He carried no weapon, but he didn't need one. The sheer presence of him was a weapon. For a long moment, neither moved. The alien simply stared, silent, unreadable. Jalen, against every bit of common sense, broke the silence. His nerves twisted and words slipped out of his mouth before he could stop them. "You'd make a cute wife," he said with a crooked grin. He regretted it instantly. It was the kind of joke he'd make back home to ease tension, but here, in the shadow of a warlord, it was madness. His grip tightened on his weapon, preparing for the end. But instead of anger, the alien did something unexpected. He smiled. His sharp teeth flashed, and the expression, though foreign, was unmistakable. The warlord stepped closer with slow, deliberate strides. Then, without a word, he reached for the panel on the wall and pressed it. The heavy door behind Jalen slid shut with a loud clang. Locked. Jalen's throat went dry. He had walked into a trap, and the trap had just snapped shut. The alien finally spoke, his voice deep and resonant, echoing through the chamber like thunder. "Human," he said, his accent thick but clear. "You are bold. Too bold, perhaps. Do you know who stands before you?" Jalen forced himself to stand straight, though every instinct screamed at him to run. "I'm guessing the one who owns this fortress," he replied. "The warlord himself." The alien tilted his head, amused. "Krithvar," he said. "That is the name your kind fear."
"And yet you speak to me as if I am—"
"Your mate." Jalen swallowed hard. It was a joke. Krithvar's eyes narrowed, but the faint smile lingered. "A joke," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. "Strange. Few dare speak lightly in my presence." The silence stretched again. Jalen tried to think of a plan, but his mind raced. He was trapped in the heart of an enemy ship, standing before a warlord who could crush him with one hand. Yet the warlord was not striking him down. Instead, he seemed curious. Studying him, Krithvar finally stepped back, gesturing for Jalen to follow. "You amuse me, human. Walk with me." Jalen hesitated. His gut told him this was dangerous, but his pilot's instincts told him this was history in the making. Slowly, he lowered his weapon and moved forward. The corridors shifted as they walked, doors sliding open as if the ship itself obeyed Krithvar's will. Jalen caught glimpses of massive halls filled with alien banners, trophies of war, and strange machines that hummed with energy. All the while, Krithvar walked in silence, glancing back at Jalen with that same faint smile. Finally, they entered a large chamber, walls lined with glowing artifacts. At the center stood a great table carved from some unknown crystal, maps of star systems hovering above it in shifting light. Krithvar turned, his golden eyes fixed on Jalen. "You came here uninvited," the warlord said. "You spoke words no one dares speak, and yet I did not kill you. Do you know why?" Jalen shook his head, his pulse pounding. Krithvar leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low rumble. Because in all my years of conquest, no one has ever looked at me with such fearless know about power, to understand that words, spoken too quickly, could become traps. Krithvar was testing him, though Jalen could not yet tell how. Finally, the warlord broke the silence. Your kind, he said, his voice deep and rumbling, are known to be reckless. Fragile bodies, short lives, quick tempers. Yet you stand before me, locked inside my ship, and you do not beg for freedom. Why? Jalen met his gaze. Begging doesn't work with people like you. If I'm trapped here, I might as well face it standing up. Krithvar's mouth curved into a faint smile. Bravery or foolishness? Perhaps both. He moved toward a wall, pressing his hand against the glowing runes. The chamber shifted as the walls parted, revealing a narrow hallway. He gestured for Jalen to follow. Come, let us see what you are made of. Jalen hesitated, but the locked door behind him left no choice. He stepped into the hallway, keeping a cautious distance as he followed Krithvar deeper into the ship. The air grew colder, the walls lined with strange living metal that pulsed faintly with light. They entered a new chamber, this one vast and open. Strange machines filled the room, some humming with quiet energy, others still and silent. At the far end, a platform rose from the floor, surrounded by shifting patterns of light. Jalen frowned. It looked like some kind of arena. Krithvar turned to face him. In my culture, strength is not measured only by muscle. It is measured by wit, by will, by the ability to adapt. If you wish to walk my halls as anything more than a prisoner, you will prove yourself. Jalen raised an eyebrow. You want me to fight? Not fight, Krithvar said. Survive. The platform lit up, and suddenly the floor beneath Jalen shifted. Panels slid away and obstacles rose from the ground. Walls, moving platforms, beams of light cutting across paths. It was a maze, alive and dangerous. Jalen's instincts screamed at him to run, but he held his ground. What happens if I fail? Jalen asked carefully. Krithvar's golden eyes glowed brighter. Then you will not leave this chamber. Jalen cursed under his breath. He had walked straight into a trap, but now there was no turning back. He took a deep breath, stepped onto the platform, and the trial began. The first section was simple enough, moving across shifting tiles that slid beneath his feet. He remembered the zero-gravity drills from his academy days, moving light on his toes, adjusting quickly. He leapt from one tile to the next, barely keeping balance. Behind him, the floor sealed shut, leaving no retreat. The second section tested his mind. Strange alien symbols lit up across the walls, forming patterns. He realized quickly that stepping on the wrong sequence would trigger the sharp beams of light that cut across the floor. He studied the symbols, searching for logic, and finally spotted the repeating shapes that formed a safe path. It was like solving a puzzle under pressure, and though his heart raced, he forced himself to stay calm. Krithvar watched from above, arms crossed, expression unreadable. By the time Jalen reached the third section, sweat dripped down his forehead. This time, mechanical drones rose from hidden compartments, their glowing eyes fixed on him. They were not large, but their sharp movements reminded him of predators. He ducked as one lunged, rolling across the floor. His plasma sidearm was useless here. The rules of the game allowed only his own skill, so he relied on speed, timing, and human creativity. He baited one drone into slamming into another, using their momentum against them until both sparked and fell silent. Finally, Jalen stumbled out onto the last platform, chest heaving, legs burning. The arena sealed itself again, returning to silence. He looked up at Krithvar, half expecting mockery, but instead saw something else in the warlord's golden eyes. Respect. Krithvar descended from the observation platform, his towering form casting a long shadow over Jalen. Impressive, he said. You think quickly. You adapt faster than most I have seen. Perhaps your kind is not as weak as the galaxy believes. Jalen managed a tired grin. Glad I could change your mind. Krithvar stepped closer, his voice lowering. Do not mistake me. You have proven only that you are interesting, and I do not let interesting things go. The words echoed in Jalen's mind. He felt the weight of them, heavier than the trial he had just survived. This was no simple test. It was the beginning of something deeper. Krithvar gestured for him to follow again, leading him out of the chamber. As they walked, Jalen realized that every step drew him further from freedom, yet also closer to understanding this alien warlord. There was curiosity in Krithvar's gaze, a spark that suggested the warlord saw Jalen More than prey, more than a prisoner. Jalen did not know if that was good or bad, but one thing was certain. His reckless joke had set into motion something he could no longer control. And now, trapped within the heart of an enemy's ship, he would have to play along one step at a time. Jalen followed Krithvar through the winding corridors of the alien ship, still catching his breath from the strange trial. The walls pulsed faintly with light as if the entire vessel were alive and watching him. He could not shake the feeling that every step he took was being measured, every glance weighed. The Warlord walked ahead, silent and composed, yet Jalen could sense he was pleased with what he had seen. At last they entered a chamber unlike any other. The walls here were not bare metal but covered in relics. Banners from conquered worlds hung in proud display. Weapons mounted like trophies, glowing crystals humming with quiet energy. In the center stood a large circular table, carved from a dark stone that reflected the chamber's light. Krithvar stopped and turned, his golden eyes fixed on Jalen. "These are reminders," he said, gesturing at the relics. "Every banner marks a world I took. Every weapon a commander I defeated. Every crystal a treasure ripped from the hands of those who swore I would fail." Jalen looked around. The weight of history pressed in on him. These were not just objects. They were scars of an empire built on conquest. He folded his arms. "Impressive," he said, though his tone was guarded. Krithvar studied him closely. "Do you see fear when you look upon them?" Jalen shook his head. "I see victories, sure. But I also see emptiness. You took all this, but what does it give you now? Just walls covered in reminders." The Warlord's smile was faint, but it was there. "Strange," he said. "Most tremble when I show them this hall. Yet you stand and speak plainly as if I were some soldier in your camp." "Maybe that's because I've seen men like you before," Jalen replied. "Different shape, different armor, but the same look in the eyes. Always searching for something more, but never finding it." Krithvar tilted his head, intrigued. "You believe you understand me?" "No," Jalen said honestly. "But I know loneliness when I see it." For the first time, Krithvar did not answer immediately. His expression shifted, not anger, but something quieter. He stepped toward a pedestal at the far end of the chamber, where a small glowing sphere floated. He reached out and touched it gently. "This," he said, "is the first world I conquered. I was young. I thought victory would silence the hunger inside me. But hunger does not end with a single battle. It grows, each victory feeds it. And yet, as you say, it does not fill the emptiness." Jalen felt a flicker of understanding. For all his power, Krithvar was trapped by his own conquest, chained to the role of a warlord. He lived among trophies, not companions. "Maybe that's why you didn't kill me," Jalen said quietly. "You were looking for something different." Krithvar turned, his golden gaze sharp. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I wished to see how far a fragile human could go before breaking." Jalen gave a small smirk. "Well, I'm still standing." The Warlord chuckled, a low sound that echoed through the chamber. "Indeed. Still standing." He gestured toward the table, and with a wave of his hand the stone surface lit up. Holographic star maps rose into the air. Dozens of systems marked in glowing lines. Jalen leaned closer, recognizing some of the disputed zones, others unfamiliar. Krithvar tapped one glowing system. "This is where my enemies gather," he said. "They plot to strike me while I am alone. They believe my ship crippled, my will weakened." "And are they wrong?" Jalen asked. Krithvar's eyes narrowed. "That is what I must decide." Jalen studied the maps. He could see patterns, supply lines, choke points, vulnerable flanks. Human training had taught him to read battlefields, and though the scale here was massive, the principles were the same. He pointed at one system. "If they strike here, they cut off half your strength. But if you push here first, you'll turn their line against them. They won't expect it." The Warlord watched him carefully. "You see this so quickly." "Strategy is in my blood," Jalen said. "Humans aren't the strongest or the fastest, but we think differently. We use what we have." For a long moment, Krithvar said nothing. Then slowly he deactivated the map and stepped closer. "Perhaps you are more than a guest. Perhaps you are a piece I can use." Jalen met his gaze. "Or a partner," the word hung in the air. Krithvar's expression shifted, the faint smile returning. He studied Jalen as though measuring the weight of his spirit. "You speak boldly," he said. "Do you not fear what partnership with me would mean? To walk beside me is to stand against an empire of enemies." Jalen shrugged. "I wasn't planning on living forever anyway." Krithvar laughed, deep and genuine. The sound surprised Jalen, echoing through the relic chamber. The Warlord's smile lingered as he turned away. but his eyes glowed with something sharper than amusement, curiosity, respect, and perhaps the beginnings of something deeper. As they left the chamber, Jalen realized that a strange bond had begun to form. It was not trust, not yet, but something like it. He had spoken boldly to a warlord feared across the stars, and instead of death he had earned a place at his side. But he also knew this was dangerous. Bonds with men like Krithvar came with sharp edges, and if he slipped, those edges would cut deep. Still, as the heavy doors sealed behind them, Jalen could not help but feel that his reckless joke had carried him further than he ever expected. This was no longer about survival alone. It was about discovering what lay beneath the armor of an alien warlord, and whether a human's courage could change the path of a conqueror. The ship trembled. At first it was faint, like a distant rumble. Then the lights flickered, and the floor beneath Jalen's boot shook. He looked up at Krithvar, who stood in the center of the chamber with his golden eyes narrowing. "An attack," the warlord growled. Before Jalen could speak, alarms blared through the corridors. Strange guttural voices shouted over the ship's comms, calling soldiers to their stations. The air seemed to thicken, heavy with tension. Krithvar moved swiftly, his long strides carrying him toward the control hall. Jalen followed close behind, trying to keep pace. He could hear the warlord's tone, low and sharp, as he gave commands to his crew. This was no small skirmish, it was a real threat. When they reached the control hall, Jalen saw the battle unfolding on the massive screen. Sleek warships circled outside, their weapons firing bursts of energy at Krithvar's fortress-like vessel. The attackers' insignias glowed red across their hulls, a symbol Jalen didn't recognize but knew meant trouble. "They are rivals," Krithvar said grimly. "Scavengers who dream of taking my place. They believe me weakened." The ship rocked again as another blast struck its shields. Crew members worked furiously at their stations, claws dancing over alien controls. But even Jalen could see it. The attackers were coordinated, pressing hard, searching for weak points. "Your defenses won't hold forever," Jalen said. Krithvar turned to him sharply. "Do you presume to know my ship better than I?" Jalen didn't flinch. "No, but I know a trap when I see one. They're pushing you into a corner. If you fight straight, you'll lose." The warlord's golden eyes burned with challenge. "Then speak, human. What would you do?" Jalen stepped closer to the screen, studying the positions. The enemy ships were circling like wolves, forcing Krithvar to defend on all sides. But there, he saw it, a small gap, a flaw in their formation. "Pull back your main cannons here," Jalen said, pointing. "Let them think you're retreating. When they chase, swing the ship's stern around and fire your secondary battery straight into their center. Hit them where they're crowded. They'll panic." The alien officers glanced at one another, unsure. Krithvar studied Jalen for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "Do as he says," the orders went out. The great ship shifted, its massive bulk turning slowly as if in weakness. The attackers surged forward, confident of victory. But then, as Jalen predicted, Krithvar gave the command and the ship's hidden batteries roared to life. A storm of fire erupted, striking the enemy ships as they clustered too close. 1, 2, 3 vessels burst apart in flames and the rest scattered in confusion. The crew roared in triumph, their deep voices echoing through the hall. Krithvar stood tall, his eyes gleaming. "You see what others do not," he said to Jalen. "You strike where they are blind." Jalen smirked. "That's how humans survive. We're not the strongest, but we make do." The battle raged on, but now the momentum had shifted. Krithvar pressed the advantage, his ship cutting through the enemy formation with brutal precision. Within minutes, the attackers were retreating, their ships fleeing into the void. When the last of them vanished, the alarms fell silent, and the control hall settled into tense calm. The crew turned to their warlord, waiting for his judgment. Krithvar lifted his head proudly. "Victory," he declared, "and not by my hand alone." His golden gaze fell on Jalen, but by the human who stands here. The alien officers exchanged uneasy looks. To share credit was unheard of. Yet none dared challenge Krithvar's words. After dismissing his crew, Krithvar turned to Jalen, his expression softer, though still carrying that sharp edge of authority. "You could have fled when the attack began. Yet you stayed. Why?" Jalen shrugged. "Running doesn't help much in space. Besides, I don't like losing." The warlord chuckled, a deep sound that rumbled through the chamber. A strange answer, but fitting. As they walked back through the corridors, Jalen realized that something had changed. Krithvar no longer looked at him as prey or even just amusement. There was respect in his eyes, the kind earned only through fire. But with respect came danger. Jalen knew it. The Warlord was not a man who let go once he decided someone was useful or valuable. They entered a quieter hall, the hum of the ship steady again. Krithvar stopped and turned, studying Jalen closely. "You are unlike the others I have crushed," he said. "Your courage, your wit. They stir something I had forgotten. It is as if you were meant to stand beside me." Jalen's pulse quickened. He remembered his reckless words from before, the joke he had made about Krithvar being a cute wife. At the time, it had been nothing but nervous humor. But now, seeing the Warlord's piercing gaze and hearing the weight in his voice, he wasn't so sure Krithvar had ever taken it as a joke. The Warlord stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You have walked into my world, human, and proven yourself. I do not give my trust easily, yet I find myself wanting to keep you near." Jalen forced a smile, though his thoughts raced. "I'll take that as a compliment." Krithvar's faint smile returned. "It is more than that." The door behind them slid shut with a heavy clang, sealing them in once more. Jalen's heart pounded as he realized the Warlord was not finished testing him. The battle outside was over, but the true struggle, the one between them, was only beginning. The Warlord's ship traveled through the silent void, carrying both its ruler and the human who had turned her life in an unexpected direction. The crew worked with precision, never questioning their leader's decisions, though many still whispered in confusion about why a human had been given such closeness. To them, humans were strange creatures, fragile and unpredictable, but their Warlord had chosen to keep one by her side. That choice alone made them look at Daniel with both curiosity and unease. Daniel had grown more comfortable inside the ship over the days. What once felt like a prison now seemed almost like a city moving through the stars. Warriors trained in vast halls, engineers monitored glowing screens, and the sound of engines hummed like a living heart beneath his feet. He no longer felt like a stranger drifting through alien corridors. Instead, he had begun to sense that he had a place there, though he did not yet understand what that place truly was. The Warlord watched him often. She rarely spoke in front of others, but in private, she shared more than he ever expected. She told him about her homeworld, about the endless battles she had fought to claim her title, and about the loneliness that came with such power. Daniel listened with quiet respect, offering simple words that carried more weight than most of the grand speeches she had heard from alien leaders. He never tried to impress her with strength or glory. He simply treated her as a person, not just a warlord. That honesty struck her harder than any blade could. One evening, as the stars outside burned like cold fires, she invited him to a chamber few had ever seen. It was her personal hall of honor, filled with relics of past victories, shattered banners of rival clans, broken weapons, and crystals that glowed with memories of fallen foes. She led him through the room slowly, speaking of each item, her voice softer than he had ever heard. For the first time, Daniel felt the weight of her burdens, the endless fight for respect and the heavy crown she carried on her head. When they reached the end of the hall, she paused and turned toward him. Her eyes, sharp as blades, held something different now. "You once joked that I would make a cute wife," she said in her deep voice. "Among my people, marriage is not about looks or weakness. It is about strength, trust, and the will to stand together even when the stars themselves turn against you." Daniel blinked, unsure how to answer. He had not expected her to bring up his careless joke again, not here, not in this sacred place. "I didn't mean to offend you," he said carefully. "It was just a joke." Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles. "You did not offend me. You surprised me. And you still do." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant thrum of the ship's engines. Daniel's heart raced as he realized that her words carried more meaning than he first thought. She was not mocking him. She was testing him, perhaps even revealing something she rarely showed to anyone. Before he could speak again, the chamber doors opened, and one of her generals stormed inside. The warrior bowed quickly, but his tone was urgent. "Warlord, scouts report enemy ships moving on the edge of the sector. They are gathering in numbers. It may be a trap." The warlord's expression hardened instantly. She turned to Daniel only for a moment, her eyes sharp again before she gave the order. "Prepare all squadrons. We move to intercept." Daniel followed her out of the chamber, his mind racing. The enemy ships were real, not just whispers of war. And now he was caught in the middle of it all. He had seen her in private, vulnerable and open. But now he saw her as she was to the galaxy, an unstoppable leader who commanded without hesitation. The crew rushed through the corridors, preparing weapons and readying the warships that accompanied them. The Warlord stood on the command deck, her presence filling the room with unshakable authority. Daniel stayed near her side, watching the fleet align in the dark. He felt small compared to the vast ships outside, but he also felt something else, a strange determination rising within him. When the enemy fleet appeared on the scanners, the air grew tense. Dozens of hostile ships blinked into existence, surrounding them like wolves circling prey. The Warlord narrowed her eyes and gave the order to strike. Her fleet surged forward, weapons blazing, filling the void with light and fire. The battle was fierce. Alien warships clashed, their weapons cutting through shields and hulls. Explosions scattered across the black, painting the stars with brief, deadly fire. Daniel watched as the Warlord stood unshaken, guiding her forces with sharp commands and unbreakable will. Even outnumbered, her fleet moved with deadly precision, striking harder than the enemy expected. But then the tide shifted. More enemy ships arrived, overwhelming their formation. For the first time, Daniel saw the Warlord's jaw tighten in frustration. They were being surrounded, and even her brilliance might not be enough to break free. Daniel felt a surge of desperation. He was no warrior, no commander, but he had seen battles before, in human history, in strategy games, in stories passed down from his people. Something clicked in his mind as he studied the battlefield map, glowing on the screen. He stepped forward, his voice louder than he thought possible. "They're pulling you in the center," he said quickly. "They want you trapped. But look, there's a weak point on the left flank. If you strike there fast, you can break their line before they close in completely." The crew turned to stare at him, shocked that a human dared to speak during a war council. But the Warlord's eyes locked on him. For a brief moment, she said nothing. Then she gave the order, "Shift formation. Strike the left flank." Her ships moved at once, surging with sudden force. The enemy was caught off guard, their flank crumbling under the unexpected assault. Within moments, the trap was broken, and the Warlord's fleet carved a path through the enemy line. The tide of battle turned, and the hunters became the hunted. When the last enemy ship was destroyed or forced to flee, silence fell over the command deck. The crew looked at Daniel with something new in their eyes, not curiosity or suspicion, but respect. The Warlord herself turned to him, her gaze steady. "You are more than a guest here," she said. "You have earned your place." Daniel stood frozen, unsure what to say. But deep inside, he knew things had changed forever. He was no longer just a human trapped among aliens. He had become part of something greater, something that tied him to the Warlord, to her crew, and to a future he could never have imagined. Would you like me to continue part 6 with the aftermath of the battle, and how their bond deepens into something stronger, with new challenges ahead? The battle was over, but the echoes of it still rang in the Warlord's ship. The crew moved quickly, repairing damaged systems, tending to wounded, and clearing debris that clung to the hull. Sparks crackled in the corridors, smoke lingered in the air, and medics rushed through with supplies. Even with victory, the scars of war were clear. Daniel walked through the busy halls, feeling the shift in how others looked at him. Before, their eyes had been filled with doubt or even mistrust. Now they looked at him with respect. Some even gave him a nod, something he had never expected from hardened alien warriors. He wasn't one of them, but in that moment they treated him as if he belonged. He finally found the Warlord on the command deck. She stood in silence, staring at the stars outside, her hands clasped behind her back. The weight of command still rested heavy on her shoulders. Even after victory, Daniel hesitated, then stepped closer. "You won," he said softly. Her sharp eyes turned toward him. "We won," she corrected, her voice calm but firm. "Without your words, the trap might have closed. You saw what even my generals did not." Daniel shrugged a little, almost embarrassed. "I just noticed a pattern. I'm not really a soldier." She studied him for a long moment. "You think being a soldier is only about carrying a weapon. But strategy, instinct, and courage are just as important. You have those. Neradism is them." Her words sank deep into him. For the first time since he had been taken onto her ship, he didn't feel like a prisoner or an outsider. He felt like someone who had earned a place, even if only in a small way. The Warlord turned back to the stars. "More enemies will come. This was only the beginning. They fear me, fear what I have built. But now, she paused, her voice dropping lower, they will also fear you. Word will spread of the human who stood by my side. Daniel's heart thumped in his chest. That doesn't exactly sound like good news for me. Her lips curved slightly, the closest she ever came to a smile in public. It is both danger and honor. In my world, the two are often the same. Later, as the ship settled from the chaos of battle, Daniel found himself drawn into the Warlord's private chambers once more. Unlike the halls filled with steel and fire, her chamber was quieter, softer in its own way. The walls glowed with faint light, and the silence felt almost protective. She gestured for him to sit, and he did, though his mind raced. Every time they were alone, he never knew if she was about to test him, challenge him, or reveal something deeper. You spoke boldly in front of my generals, she said at last. Most would have feared death for such an act, but you trusted me to listen. Why? Daniel thought carefully. Because I trust you. I didn't think you'd punish me for trying to help, and I don't like watching people I care about being trapped. The Warlord's eyes fixed on him sharply at those words. People you care about. She repeated slowly, as if tasting the phrase. Do you care about me, human? Daniel froze. His mouth went dry. It was a question that felt heavier than the void outside. He thought about their time together. The way she had shown him her Hall of Honor, the way she listened to his words, the way she had remembered his careless joke about her being a cute wife. Yes, he admitted finally. I do. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. The Warlord's fierce gaze softened only slightly, but enough for him to see. Then you must understand, she said quietly. Caring for me is not simple. It is a path filled with blood, enemies, and endless trials. My life is war, Daniel. Any who stand beside me must be ready to share that weight. Daniel swallowed hard, but he did not look away. Then maybe I'll just have to be ready. The Warlord studied him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Finally, she stepped closer, standing so near that the strength of her presence almost overwhelmed him. Perhaps, she said, her voice low. You are braver than even you know. Their moment was interrupted when a chime rang through the chamber. A message from the fleet officers. Another signal had been received. Scouts reporting that enemy reinforcements were gathering on distant borders. The Warlord's eyes hardened again, the softness vanishing as quickly as it came. She turned toward the door. War does not wait, she said, and neither will I. Daniel rose with her, his heart steady now. He understood that their bond was not just personal. It was tied to the battles they faced, to the storms yet to come. As they walked back onto the command deck, side by side, the crew turned to see them. To the warriors, it was a striking sight. Their warlord, the unshakable leader, and the human who had already proven himself in the fires of battle. For the first time, Daniel didn't feel out of place under their eyes. He felt like he had stepped into a role he hadn't known he could fill. The stars ahead glimmered with both danger and possibility. Whatever came next, Daniel knew one thing for certain. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was part of her story, and she was becoming part of his. Would you like me to make Part 7 the final climax where the Warlord and Daniel face the greatest threat yet, and their relationship is tested in a way that decides both their fates? The fleet moved through the stars with quiet purpose, their victory behind them but the shadow of war still ahead. Daniel stood on the command deck beside the Warlord, watching the endless night stretch before them. The reports from the scouts were clear. Enemy reinforcements were gathering, and this time it was not just a trap. It was a final push, a strike meant to break the Warlord's power forever. The crew worked with grim focus, preparing weapons, charging shields, and whispering in low voices. Everyone knew the coming battle would decide not only their lives but the future of their people. Daniel could feel the tension in the air, sharp and heavy like a blade waiting to fall. The Warlord stood at the center of it all, tall and unyielding. Her voice cut through the silence as she addressed her warriors. The enemy gathers because they fear us. They fear what we have built, what we stand for. They think they can crush us with numbers, but we will show them what strength truly is. The crew answered with a roar, their faith in her unshaken. Yet Daniel saw more than the crew did. Behind her fierce eyes there was something else. A quiet weight, a burden only she carried. She was not just fighting for victory. She was fighting for survival, for her people, and perhaps, though she had not said it, for him too. When the alarm sounded, the stars outside came alive. Dozens of enemy ships blinked into existence, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. Then dozens more. The void seemed to swarm with them until the Warlord's fleet looked small in comparison. The crew's determination wavered, but the Warlord did not. She lifted her hand and her fleet moved into formation. The battle began with fire. Energy blasts tore across the darkness. Shields flared and broke, and ships burned like falling stars. The Warlord barked orders, her voice steady, each command turning chaos into deadly precision. Her fleet struck hard, cutting through the enemy lines where they were weakest. But the enemy was vast, their numbers overwhelming. Daniel clutched the rail beside him, his eyes locked on the glowing battle map. He could see the same pattern as before, the enemy trying to push them inward to drown them in numbers. But this time there was no simple flank to strike. This time the trap was meant to consume them entirely. The Warlord's jaw tightened. Her ships were holding, but barely. Each loss carved into their strength. Even her brilliance could not hold back the tide forever. For the first time, Daniel saw her shoulders tense as if the burden might finally break through. He forced himself to think. He wasn't a soldier, but he had seen things she might not. Then it hit him. "They're focusing everything on you," he said quickly. "They're so desperate to destroy your flagship that they're ignoring your rear guard. If you push the guard forward now, full speed, you can split them down the middle." The Warlord glanced at him, her sharp eyes meeting his. There was no time for long debate. After a brief pause, she gave the order. Her rear guard surged forward, engines blazing, cutting into the enemy line from behind. The enemy, caught off guard, faltered. Suddenly, their formation broke, confusion spreading through their ranks. The Warlord seized the moment, leading her fleet into a brutal charge that tore the enemy apart. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but slowly, the tide shifted. The enemy ships began to scatter, their once massive swarm breaking into fragments. Explosions lit the void like thunder. One by one, the enemy fell until at last, silence returned to the stars. The command deck erupted in cheers. The crew shouted in triumph, raising their fists and weapons. They had faced impossible odds and survived. They had followed their Warlord into the fire, and she had led them out again. But Daniel's eyes were not on the crew. They were on her. She stood in silence, her gaze fixed on the fading wreckage outside. Victory was hers, but the weight of it pressed heavy. Slowly she turned to him. "You have stood beside me through more than I expected," she said quietly. "You have given me more than advice. You have given me trust, and you have cared when others only feared." Daniel's throat tightened. "You didn't need me. You would have found a way." "Perhaps," she said. "But with you, the way was clearer." The crew continued to celebrate, but in that moment it felt as though the universe had narrowed to just the two of them. The Warlord, fierce and unyielding, and the human who had once been a prisoner but had become something far more. She stepped closer, her eyes softer than he had ever seen them. "Do you still think I would make a cute wife, human?" Daniel blinked, caught between laughter and disbelief. He remembered his careless joke, the one that had started all of this. He swallowed hard, then smiled. "I think you'd make more than that." For the first time, the Warlord truly smiled, not the sharp grin of battle, but something real, something rare. She raised her hand, not in command, but in quiet acceptance. "Then perhaps when this war is truly over, we will see." The stars outside burned brighter, endless in waiting. Daniel knew there would be more battles, more trials, and more storms to face. But he also knew he would not face them alone. Together they had survived what should have destroyed them. Together they had found something stronger than war, and somewhere deep in the void a human and a Warlord had written a story no one could have imagined, a story that was only just beginning.